In their first lesson, Cosmo was having a real hard time understanding critical points, points of inflections, absolute minimums and maximums, and discontinuities. He just didn't get the difference between all the different kinds, and who could blame him? There are almost 6 different kinds of maximas and minimas, and there are just at least 3 kinds of discontinuities, not to mention critical points, which seem like they can be anywhere. He just couldn't piece it all together. But Louie, being the thinking fella that he is, remembered that Cosmo loved to skateboard and he did it whenever he had the chance. This he thought was the perfect way to get him to understand math. He could relate a function to a road and relate Cosmo on a skateboard to a point. It was perfect. Louie started by taking Cosmo to the highest hill outside of town. He told him to think of a function like a road that you were looking at from the side. He then taught him to think of his skateboard like a point on a function, only it was on a road. You could see Cosmo's excitement start to show. He then explained to him that whenever his skateboard was flat, or not on any sort of incline or decline, that he was at a critical point. This meant that any time Cosmo was at the top or the bottom of a hill, or even at a point where the hill leveled off, which they call a point of inflection, that he was at a critical point. These things could occur anywhere along the road, so long as his skateboard was flat when he reached that point. Louie then had Cosmo take him to the local skate park. He then went on to show him what absolute max and mins were. He showed him that anytime he was riding and he reached the highest point, like the top of a half pipe, that he was at the absolute maximum. He then walked him to the middle of the half pipe and told him that whenever he was at the lowest point on a ramp or a half pipe or even a pool, that he was at the absolute minimum. That these absolute max and mins occurs when he was at the absolute highest point or the absolute lowest point while still being on the road. Louie then walked over to where the skaters were doing tricks like grinding and jumping, and he explained to Cosmo that anytime a skateboard wasn't on the ground, it was called a discontinuity. It's a point where you aren't on the function anymore. You're actually kind of jumping off until you hit the ground, and then when you get back on, you're back on the function. Louie explained that whenever you see a gap in a function or on a graph, it's called a discontinuity, and that there were many different kinds that they would get into on their next lesson. Cosmo was overwhelmed. He never imagined that math was so much a part of it, something he already loved. Louie could see Cosmo's shock, so he told him to go skate around and shout out whenever he reached a point that applied to what they were talking about. Believe it or not, Cosmo had it down packed. He was screaming absolute max, a total absolute min. Louie, check out this awesome discontinuity. For the first time, Louie didn't feel like the only nerd on the entire planet. You wouldn't think it, but it really was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.